ground bait plays such a massive part at this time of the year, and I've got some brilliant tips that's going to make a big difference to your results. How long it takes for the fish to arrive onto your bait. You get to the point where you're going out and you're doing this and you're getting bites. How do you pick the right ground bait? Well, I tend to keep things really simple, and I've got 4 mixes. So all throughout the summertime when I'm carp fishing, I love our coarse mixes. So coarse carp and then coarse primer tracks when it's really warm and the fish are really hungry. Those are the mixes that I stick to. And then for me F1 fishing on my snake lakes, I love pole mix. Again, it's that nice colour, a light colour when there's plenty of colour in the water, and the fish come in, they cloud up and it gives them confidence to eat. But when you're starting to go into the cooler months, I think it's even more important that you pick the correct ground bait. In the summertime, you can sort of feed whatever you want. The fish are active and they're coming and they're going to eat it. But when the colour of the water starts to drop out of it, the fish are always a lot more nervous. And what you find is, as it's going into the really cold months, you need to be very careful with what you feed, but also how much of it you feed. So that's when I opt for Skimmers Dark, and the reasons being I'm going to explain. So firstly, it's that nice dark colour. I just think it blends into the bottom, which is perfect. Another big thing about this, which I think is really important, is the softness. So again, when you mix like coarse carp, coarse primer tracks, they're very coarse, very heavy, and they feel almost like sand, which again I think is perfect for the summertime. But in the winter time, I think that softness to your ground bait is really important. The last thing is the attractiveness. So again, in the summertime, you want a ground bait that comes up and goes back down, keeps the fish rooting around. But in the winter time, and again, as it's going colder, when a fish comes in, the first fish that comes in and starts eating the ground bait is puffing up. And I think that's a brilliant attraction. So again, the odd fish that's looking around, as soon as one starts eating, it's starting to cloud up, and say very soft, clouding up off the bottom. And I just think that drags more and more fish in. The last thing that I want to touch on is the name of the baits. So it's labelled as Skimmers Dark, but the reason I love it is it doesn't matter where I'm going fishing when the weather gets cold. So really, October time through till March, if I'm fishing for skimmers, I use Skimmers Dark. If I'm fishing for F1s, I use Skimmers Dark. If I'm fishing for carp, I use Skimmers Dark. It's just a perfect all-round mix, and for me, it's one thing, again, when it's really cold, that you fed your bait and you're waiting for the fish to arrive at times. When you fed it, I'm not thinking, I've fed something that's way too strong, way too powerful. I'm just thinking, well, the fish haven't arrived on it yet. And I think that is so important when you're going into these colder months. What baits can I use with my ground bait? So here today at the Glebe, there's loads of small little roach, loads of nice skimmers and loads of carp as well. So I can be quite positive, I feel, with what I can feed. Again, we're going into October, it's not absolutely freezing yet, so I feel like worms and casters is going to be absolutely perfect. So I've got a couple of pints of some nice big casters. There's plenty enough for a nice session, so some nice big casters. I've also chopped up a few worms, not ultra fine, because again I know the fish are still active, so almost like the size of casters is the biggest bit, and then an odd and a little bit smaller than that. Also, I've got a few micro pellets, brilliant for skimmers and carp, so those are going to be absolutely perfect. Then the last bait that I've got with me, and we're not actually going to use them today, is live maggots. But if we come and the fishing has been really difficult, and this is where every venue's a little bit different, again depending on the time of year, But when it's really difficult and you're expecting it to be quite hard, I just feed ground bait. Just 100% ground bait by itself, no micros in it, no worms, no casters, just feed me ground bait. That's going to be my attraction to drag the fish in, and then I'll just be loose feeding a few live maggots. So as a rule, the better you're expecting it to be and the more males, worms, casters, micro pellets can be brilliant. But on the harder scale, lean towards more ground bait and just loose feed a few live maggots to attract a few fish into your peg. So how do we start our peg? I want to feed a nice little area, made me mix up, quite particle rich because we're just going into October. I still feel like the fishing's going to be good, but I want to spread my bait over an area, but I want to be accurate. So I definitely don't want to be throwing it in, I want to pod it in. One thing that I do with my ground bait, with my particles in it or no particles in it, is I'm always going to feed it loose. So just cut my ground bait in, mixed it nice on the damp side, and I don't squash it. I literally just gently, that's it. That's all you need, just so that when you turn your pot over, it's all going to come out. It's not going to flow. I've not pressed all the air out of it, and I'm just going to spread it around in a little area. So my first pot's ready to go, and lining up with my far bank marker, so where I've plumbed up to. So I'm going to be fishing in my front rest. So my first one, exactly where my pole would be underneath me. I'm going to turn that over, and that's my first pot. And then my next one I'm going to feed slightly to the left, and then another one slightly to the right, and then whatever's left just a little bit further back. I think biggest thing with your initial feed is once you put it in, you definitely can't take it out. So it's how good do you think the fishing is going to be when you're doing this? And I still feel like even on the hardest of days, you can still be quite positive with the ground bait. That's why we picked Skimmers Dark. Just be less positive with the amount of particles that you're feeding. Again, another nice way of fishing like this is, if ever you're a bit, do you know what, I'm not 100% sure, a good starting point would be to feed 3 pots of loose ground bait with nothing in it, and then 1 little pot of a top-up mix, so a tiny little ball with some particles in it, exactly where you're going to position your rig. That's always a safe way of doing it if you're not 100% sure how many particles to be able to put in your mix, if you don't know how good the fishing's going to be. But I always like feeding it like this, even if it's really deep, like 8-10 foot. I'd always want to feed my bait like this, because I think to get some fish coming in the peg, you want it spread over an area, and I think this is the most attractive way to feed your ground bait as well. So again, just come back a little bit, not a lot on my pole, for 18 inches, and then just spread my bait out. Again, as it falls through, it's going to be really attractive, coming down as a nice carpet, and all those particles are going to be spread around. So the last little bit, and I always think it's a good idea to measure your bait out at the start. So if you've been for a session and you feel like maybe I fed a little bit too much, you've got a better idea of how much you actually fed. Now, when I said maybe I fed a little bit too much, how do you know that, oh, do you know what, I feel like I fed a little bit too much today? And it's how long it takes for the fish to arrive onto your bait. So as a rule, if you're going out and the fish are on there immediately, you can up your particles, maybe feed a little bit less if you feel like topping up's working well. So you go and you catch a few, and then your peg fades a little bit, so you feed a little ball with some bait in it, drop in, and the fish are on it straight away. You don't need to feed as much at the start. You might be able to feed 2 pots of loose and 1 really rich ball, and then leave it 20 minutes and drop straight in on it. But the harder you're expecting it to be, that's when it's waiting for them fish to come. And rather than feeding maybe 5 pots of bait with loads of bait in, I might feed 3 pots of just ground bait, and then just loose feed a few live maggots over it. So it's very much venue dependent, time of the year dependent. But if you measure your bait and say spread it out over a bit of an area after your match or your session, you've always got that gauge of, right, next time I come, I've got a better idea of how to do my initial feeding. not taken long at all for these fish to find the bait. And the biggest thing is the carp were on it straight away, getting like little pimps and signs. And the biggest bit I've got to work out now is when there's some fish arrived on your bait, is how do you feed it? Whether topping up is working well, loose feeding can be brilliant. We'll definitely say on the hardest of days, that's when loose feeding really, really comes into its own. And if you find that you're waiting a bit of time for some fish to arrive on your bait, a great tip is to fish just past it. So behind me there, I've got my dolly butt. It's just a lovely, lovely little carp. So I've had a few bites already. It's a lovely, lovely fish. What we're saying, it's not just Skimmers Dark, everything eats it, which is why I love it. So I'm going to pop that one back. But when you're fishing and you started off how you've normally started and feel like, do you know what, I want to have a look on my pole, sometimes you can get loads of bites fishing just past your bait, rather than what we're doing at the moment, fishing right on top of our bait. If you're not getting many bites right on top of your bait, going just past it can be brilliant. And I think that's when, in those really cold months, November, December, January, depends on what winter we have, we all know what it's like. But when it's rock hard and really cold, that's when fishing just past your bait can be absolutely massive. One of the best tips I can give you for this style of fishing is this little thing in front of me. It is a front rest, and I want to give you a couple of things of what I do to make it really easy. So the first one is the position of your back shot. Even when there's no wind, you still want your back shot on the line. But when we're fishing in a front rest, my pole tip's going to be here. My back shot I want just level or just under the water, and what you'll be able to see is sort of 2/3 the way up the rig, so it's a lot closer to my pole tip than if I was actually holding my pole, and that's where I want my back shot. So the next thing is setting your front rest up. And also you might be thinking, well, you're only fishing 13 metres, I can hold my pole at that length quite easily, there's no wind. It's more important about holding your rig still. Even though you think you're holding your pole still, it's nowhere near as good as the presentation you can get when you're using a front rest. So when it comes to setting it up, got my back shot where I want it. And again, as it goes colder, you're gonna be needing to be more and more and more patient. So lift my rig out, can lay my bulk in, get my rig exactly where I want it. Say just lower it down. And then with my pole support there, can you see that my back shot is nowhere near the water? So I can lean forward and it's still bouncing. It's just off the water. So this is where sort of just lowering your tip to the right position where your back shot is just level. So there, tiny amount, but now my rig is going to sit so still. Even if my pole tip's wiggling about in the wind, my float is still going to sit dead still. And this is, say, one of the most important things when it comes to this style of fishing, especially when it gets cold, because you might have to sit and wait 2-3 minutes before you get a bite. So being able to hold your rig dead still on top of your bait is going to make a massive, massive difference to how many fish you actually catch. You'll get to the point where you're going out and you're doing this and you're getting bites, and it will happen to you because it's happened to me, and then you ship out and think, well, there's loads of fish there, I'll just hold my pole, and you're holding it and all of a sudden you don't get any bites. You lay your rig back in, put it in your front rest, and magically the float goes under. One of the most important things I use at this time of the year, and honestly I would put that down to say one of the biggest things as to why you can catch so many fish. Gets a bit of a bad rep, but used in the right way, you physically cannot hold the pole as still as you can when you're using a front rest. will say, when you do hook a big fish, we have to wait, you know, a few minutes, holding our rig still. The last thing you want to do is rush the fish in. So just keep your pole together. So just let the fish swim around, as long as it's out of my peg. A lot of the time with a big carp, when you do hook them, you've got a tendency to think, oh no, 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 I don't want it to break me, I don't want it to break me. But just by keeping your pole together, without sort of any harsh movements, especially as it starts to cool down, you hook them, they go on their little mad run. Because you're not doing anything, they just sort of, at times, they just sort of stop fighting. It almost feels like they forget they're hooked. And just gently taking your time, shipping back. Say, let the elastic do the work. That's why I think picking the right elastic is so, so important. Just take your time. Say, just a nice steady ship back. So I absolutely love this time of the year. Not always when the weather's really bad and it's chucking it down with rain. What I mean is the fishing. You can just sort of fish down one hole. You never really know what you're going to hook next. I've had some amazing days. It is definitely, from my match fishing side of it, when you can fish like this and just target a bit of everything. Say you could hook a bream, a roach, a great big carp. It's just such a lovely way of fishing, especially once you've set, you know, you've sort of set your little stall out. You can start off with, you know, a bomb or a little feeder, trying to catch an early carp. Just running off a bit. So again, this is why, you know, not taking my pole apart. Once you've sort of set your little stall out, you've fed your bait, you know, you're waiting for them fish to arrive. And as the light starts to fade, say it normally gets to for me, the latter part of my match, but it could be your session. And at times, you think that there weren't even any carp in the lake that you're fishing, and then all of a sudden, they just start feeding. You can have some, say, terrific sport fishing like this. So just nicely back on my roller. I'm not rushing to want to break down. Trust me kit. So trust me elastic that I've picked the right one. So if you feel like, you know, well, what is the right one compared to what I'm used to using? Like, everyone's got a different preference. But what you want is just plenty of elastic out. That's the biggest thing. And for them to not lock you out. You don't want to be hooking a fish and having like 3 inch of elastic out whilst you're shipping back. The worst thing that you can do. Even though you think, well, it's charging around the peg, I'm not going to get another bite, but it's amazing you will. But if you lose a fish in your peg, that's more often than not the time when you go out and you can't get a bite. So just take your time. See, where I'm not putting loads and loads of pressure on it, it's just plodding around underneath me. And a lot of them, they will do that. Just take your time, it's gentle pressure. You know, at times you have to wait a long time for a bite, and the last thing that you want to do is, even at times when you're looking at them, especially because it's clear, you can see them swimming around, you think, oh, well, that's a big fish. You start feeling like, well, I need to pull it a bit harder because I can see how big it is. You don't. Just gradual pressure, and once it's had enough, it'll just pop up. Like, if you are fishing a venue and it is quite deep, just make sure that, you know, what you stood on solid. But rather than pulling loads of elastic out, what I'll often do is just stand up. So rather than having like 2-3 inch of elastic out whilst I'm trying to net the fish, as long as your platform's solid, I just stand up to be able to get the height rather than trying to pull all the elastic out when you're using, you know, light tackle. So it's look lovely in the corner of the mouth. Pop him out with my disgorger. Thank you ever so much, Mr. Carpy. Stunning fishing, absolutely beautiful. Pop it back. Go out and catch another one. comes to the rig to use, it is very much dependent on the venue and how good the fishing is. But the biggest tip I'd like to give you is regarding your elastic. I think that's one of the things that makes a massive, massive difference in the winter time especially. And I always try and opt for a really light, hollow elastic, because no matter what you're hooking, whether it's a small roach, a perch, a skimmer, or the biggest carp in the lake, you'll be amazed at how many you actually get out when the winter time comes. That soft elastic. I used to do loads of this when I used to fish at Gold, and some of the carp are massive, and it's amazing that you go in early on, catch a few skimmers, not many carp, and then all of a sudden you see a few pimps coming up, float sits there, flies under, and the size of them you catch, it's almost like the edge fish. You catch some massive, massive carp. Oh, missed a bite then. Got a bit carried away with that strike. Yeah, the amount of great big carp that you catch on here. And I think that's one of the biggest things I would say when it comes to your rig, is just picking the right elastic so that whatever you hook, you can get out. In terms of mainline, hook lengths, again, the colder it gets, I normally opt for sort of an 018 mainline, dead simple shotting pattern, a bulk and a dropper or a bulk and 2 droppers. Biggest thing is, say, using this front rest is making sure that my rig is dead stable. I think that bit is so important. And then hook length, it's funny because I've caught some massive fish fishing as light as 010 and a tiny little 20 hook. When it goes really cold, they just don't fight anywhere near as hard. And that's to say the biggest thing that I would say with your rig is the elastic. I think is the most important part, is when you hook a fish, whatever you're hooking, that it just comes out your peg nicely, and you'll be amazed at how many of, say, these great big units that you can actually get out using light tackle. I keep on telling you where you don't come home from that sound. I will be kicking you out. You don't come home. We have been well and truly spoiled here today at the Glebe. So the fishing is just unbelievable. Hopefully though, we don't get an absolute freezing cold winter. We've got break ice, because I don't really enjoy that. But today, because the fish are still active, say worms and cast, I feel like they've been brilliant. But don't forget them red maggots. Say your ground bait. It's why I love this Skimmers Dark so much. It's just, I don't have to think about that. All I've got to think about is how good do I expect the fishing to be. If I feel like it's going to be quite tough and there's not lots of little tiny fish in, then maggots is definitely my #1 choice. But here, because there's loads of skimmers and bream, and the fact that it's so mild, so I've been spoiled today with the fishing and the conditions, I just felt worms and casters would be a brilliant way to go about it. And it has been, so I've been well and truly spoiled. But that's the nice thing about, say, with that Skimmers Dark. For me, everything eats it. I know it's called Skimmers Dark. We've had loads of carp today. Go to tunnel a lot and I catch a load of F1s on it. So don't let the name put you off. Look at that for a fish. What a stunner.